One of the questions that we get often is how to implement a strategic solution and a roadmap in order to meet today's data-hungry organizations. Having a solid solution or having a solid strategy allows you to be able to get there quicker. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to Microsoft data governance solution called Purview, which allows you to be able to find, govern, and also be able to pull data from different data sources so that you can be able to have a collection of it and be able to see exactly what you have as part of your inventory. My name is Leonard Mongi from Amli, and we release a ton of content to help you strategize and manage your data. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and all the links that we're going to be talking about today can be found in the description below. Thank you, and let's get to work. Alright, so to get started, what you want to do is go ahead and jump over to your Azure environment. And then in your Azure environment, in this case, I've already logged into ours here. And then you can come here and search for a resource. So in this case, I'm going to search for Purview. And you can see here that we do have Purview accounts so that you can be able to go ahead and set it up. We have also the marketplace that you can also be able to pull this from. So I've already set up ours. As you can see here, I have it as one of my resources that I've already pre-accessed. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and do create. And once I do the create, now this is going to allow me to be able to create the Purview account. So based on how your environment is set up, in our case here, we have it as pay as you go. And then I'm going to go ahead and pick one of our resources, our resource groups here. In this case, it's our Amli data. And then go ahead and set up environment or however you want to call it. So let's, for the sake of this conversation, let's call this one Purview development. So long as it does not exist, I will be able to set it up. And it has gone ahead and validated it to make sure that it does not exist, and then whichever location that you're on. So currently ours is South Central, and then the managed resources that you want to use. So these are all Azure configurations that you can be able to do. Then the next piece here is the networking, how you want it to be accessible. In this case, I'm just going to leave it to all networks. If you want yours to be private endpoints, if you have already configured those, you can absolutely go that direction. And then I'm going to go ahead and tap over to tags. And then this one here allows you now to, for benefit of billing, or when you're looking at your consolidated billing, you can be able to see what tags that you have there. So this is more for you to be able to see it from consolidated billing perspective. And then once all that's said and done, you can go ahead and review and review environment. So here you can see that my validation has passed. So long as that validation has passed, now I can be able to go ahead and click on my create here. And once I go ahead and create, I've already created one, so I'm not going to create another one here. Once I create, it's going to go ahead and give me this environment here now, to where I can see our Purview environment. So based on this environment, based on how we've configured it, I can be able to see this more from administration perspective. I can be able to see our capacity usage, our storage usage, and what have you. I can actually be able to also see our activity logs if we have any, our access controls, however we have that configured. And this is also, you can be able to grant different roles, grant different permissions to your users that are going to be using this environment. And if you missed to create tags on the other side, you can still be able to come here and create those tags as well. Manage network, be able to see pretty much all the Azure configurations that you can be able to do, you'll be able to do them here. Once that's said and done, then I'm going to navigate back over here, and I can go ahead and now open my Purview environment so that I can be able to now start utilizing it. So once I click on that navigation there, it's going to put me into this environment, which is my my Purview environment now. And you can also access this directly by going to web.purview.azure.com. And once you get here, the first thing that you're going to see is our landing page, which contains different assets in different items that you can actually be able to utilize. So I'm just gonna go through these guys here so that you can be able to see what we have, and then we're gonna actually do a real life pull of the data so that you can also utilize that. So the first thing that you do actually, let's first of all go through these menus here. So we have the data catalog. It's a catalog where I can be able to see all my assets, be able to see what we have out there. Then we have the data map, which allows you to be able to see your mapping of different data sources that you're bringing on, and we're gonna look at that here in details. Then data share, and data share here, as you can see here, as of the recording, as of this recording, it's actually still in preview. This data share here, you can actually be able to integrate that with what we get from Azure, because we can do data share here. And I can go ahead and set up this data share as well. If I go ahead and set up this data share as well, it's what's going to be utilized by my Purview here for us to be able to share data, whether with your internal resources or external resources. And then you have your data estate insights. We're going to look at that here in just a moment. Then data policies, and that there's a little bit about the estate. This is where you kind of see how your data is curated, so we'll be able to see that in just a moment. Then you have your data policies, and the data policies is now where you define your business driven or your business rules. If you have any business rules that needs to be defined for your data, this is where you're going to do it. And then from management perspective, we're going to look at this a little bit in details here, but this is where you can be able to set up your workflows. You can be able to do your data lineage processing, all that you can be able to do it over here. All right, so over to my sources. Now we're going to go to the very top, and you see that we do have the source here. So first of all, ignore what you're seeing here, and let's go through the registration process. So the registration process is actually where you get different data sources. So this is where you're defining where your data is going to be coming from. So if I go ahead and use the filters that we have here, we can see that we can be able to bring data from Synapse, Cosmos. You can be able to bring it from managed instances of SQL Server, or even if you're doing database as a service, you can absolutely be able to bring that data as well. Then from the database perspective, this is different database applications that we have out there, the DB2s, the Mongos, the Cassandras, and what have you here, the Snowflake. We can actually also be able to bring in that data from Teradata as well. And we're gonna revisit here this one here in just a moment. Then from files perspective, if you have any files that are stored in, like for instance S3, you have the ability to bring that on board as well. So it becomes a very good tool here to actually be able to inventory what you have within your environment. If you have Erwin for your design tool, Looker for your visualization, or even Power BI, you have the ability to bring those guys on board here. So in my case, I'm gonna go ahead and navigate back to databases, and I'm gonna navigate to SQL Server. I'm gonna go ahead and register this. So let's call this one Amli development. And then my endpoint here, which is my SQL Server name, that's what I have on my SQL Server. Remember, you can be able to define that either by name, by IP address, port number, and what have you. And then I'm going to specify where I want to put that, what type of collections. So before I actually go into the collections, let's navigate over here. And let's look at different collections that we do have here. So at the moment, I have the on-prem SQL Server and Power BI. I can absolutely go ahead and create a new collection, and let's call this one. This is going to be our Data Warehouse 2019 environment. And we can bring in all our Data Warehouse 2019 environment here as part of our collection. And then of course you have to define who has permissions. Now this here is important. We need to pay attention to this guy here. So let me first of all go ahead and create it, and then we're going to talk about the roles and permissions. So that's my collection has been created. As you can see here, I have 0 assets, 0 sources, and 0 scans. So nothing is really going on here. But we do want to define our roles and permissions, which is important. So in this case here, we see that I am the collection administrator. So if you want your users to be able to do some of the key features, let's say for instance, like be able to define the workflows, and we're gonna look at that here in just a moment, the insights, if you want them to be able to do the data share, the data readers, this is where you define that from the collection perspective. That's where you define the permissions, or that's where you define the roles of what they're going to be, what you want your users to be doing. So again, that's the one that we just created. So let's go back to the sources, and we're gonna use that this collection here that we just created as our holding for our SQL Server. So I'm gonna go back and do the registration process. Let's pick up our SQL Server. Let's go ahead and define the name, and let's call this one only development. And then our collection that we just created, which is that guy there, and then we're gonna go ahead and do the registration. So because the runtime is already in place, I will be able to get to that data source, and you see what just happened. So now I have a SQL Server that I can visualize here. It has 0 scans, 0 discovered. Going back to the map, it has discovered and kind of put it there to where I can be able to see that it's associated to this data warehouse environment. So if there's another SQL Server that you want to add as part of that collection, it'll just keep on growing. So you're getting that visualization here of how your data is related. So let's go to details here, and we're gonna go ahead and initiate a scan, and this one, let's call it initial scan. And then from this one, we're gonna define our integration. And then from the database perspective, this is the database that I want to be scanning. I do know that in that environment, there's a data warehouse called database called Data Warehouse 2019. And then in that Data Warehouse 2019, we're going to use the credentials. So you have the ability to use either SQL authentication, you can create a new authentication if you want to. But in my case here, I have this on-prem SQL connection. So we're gonna look at that here in just a moment, what that all means. And then of course, our collection here, I'm gonna go ahead and test the connectivity. And it's successful, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue. And these are different tables that, or different assets that it has discovered in that specific environment here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do okay. And then these are different rows that we can be able to define. If we have any data sensitivity, I can be able to do that. These are different rows that I had defined for the previous environment. So I'm just gonna use the default SQL Server one here. And then I can define how often I want this to actually be running. Do I want it to be reoccurring? Do I want it to be once? Whichever one, in this case, we can be able to define it. So because this is running off my machine here, I'm just gonna go ahead and do a single scan. But again, you can be able to do that. And then I'm gonna go ahead and save and run. And we have a scan that has been created, and it's already queued for it to go ahead and run. And then the scan rule is actually using the SQL Server. So we're gonna go ahead and let this guy here run, and let's see what it's going to discover. So while it's doing that, let's go and look at that authentication process that I just used there. So I'm gonna navigate over to the management, and in management at the very bottom, I have the credentials. So if I don't want to keep on providing the username and password for my SQL Server environment, this is where I would actually create a secret key that can be able to that can be actually stored in Azure environment. So this is that connection that I just used here. And if I go ahead and do the edit, you can see I'm using the account name in this case, and then the vault for our secret. I'm not going to go into details on that, but this is how you can actually be able to store that to where I don't have to keep on remembering what authentication that I'm using for the SQL Server environment there. And then based on that, I can just go ahead and define it as part of my process of connecting to the SQL Server. All right, so let's go back to our data map here, and let's go view here. So we're still in process of scan, so it's actually queued. So we're gonna give it a little bit, and then we're gonna come back and see how this is progressing. So our scan is still in progress. and you can see so far we've already discovered 39 different items out there in our last scan. So we can see all applied scans, so we know what's progressing here, and just keep an eye on this one and we will wait for it to complete. All right, so our scan has completed successfully. We have our completed status there. As you can see, we don't have any failures, which is good. We did discover 39 different assets, and then 38 out of that they are classified assets. So we're gonna jump into that in just a moment. So if we go back to monitoring, I can be able to also see what has worked, what has failed over time. So in the last few days, because we just started this, if we're doing the continuous, you'll be able to see this while you're monitoring over time. Then from classification perspective, these are rules that you apply within your environment so that we can say, let's say for instance, if we want to discover social security numbers, if we want to discover anything personal identifiable, we can be able to have that here. So if we come here and do, like for instance, email, I can be able to see the classification for the email, and I can see what kind of rules we apply, the data patterns. So the format here, I will be able to see that. And then you can also define your own classifications. If you want to create your own, you can absolutely create one here. Any managed attributes that we have out there, you can also create your own. So that gives us the data map perspective, so kind of from top to bottom on what we can be able to accomplish. Now it gets better because remember, we just completed this process here of bringing the development environment. So now if I go back to my data catalog, so remember I started with data map and then I went now to data catalog here, and I go browse my assets, and I'm gonna go browse this guy here. So this is now the joy of having this environment, because I can go out and visualize what type of data do I have out there. So it kind of tells me here that this is my environment, the objects that were found out there. If we want to do the classification, so in our case this is tables, we don't have any reports in this case. If we were doing Power BI, we'll be able to see that. If there's any stored procedures, I'll be able to see that. If there's any folders, so this is the object level object types that we've been able to discover. Now here's the classification. So out of the data set that we just brought in, we see that we have about 6 of them here that have personal identifiable information. So if I go ahead and click on this, I can see that in customers table here, I'm gonna end up with a situation where the data has the schema there. You see, email address, personal information. So it has the ability to classify the data for you without you having to go and manually look at this data. So we can also see the data lineage. In this case, I don't have any, and that's another piece there that we're going to come back to here in just a moment. But this is what I wanted to dwell on in this case here, because it's actually seeing that data here and telling me that there is this piece here where we do need to go and either mask this data or be able to ensure that there's the security or any security that's tied with that data here in case it gets compromised. So that's from catalog perspective, where we're able to visualize all that good stuff. And then you can see here we don't have any contacts. The labels, we can be able to do that because data labeling is also very important, and we're gonna see that here in just a moment. So that's from browse perspective. Then from groceries perspective, I can be able to come here and define the grocery term. So let's put a scenario here. If somebody was to come here and look at this data and they're like, okay, we have DIM accounts. What does DIM mean? In this case, if you've dealt with a data warehouse environment, we know that's a dimension, but there's somebody that might not be aware of what that means. That's where you come in and provide this grocery, where you can actually be able to define terms of what means, of what your data means. So I can create a new term, and then it's a default term. If I want this one to be a template, I can be able to do that as well. And then define what attributes we add into that, whether it's text, whether it's integer, whichever one we want to do that, whichever one we want to kind of show. So we have that capability to label our data. So that's another key piece that we get with this tool here. That's very, very important. So that's from catalog perspective and from data map perspective. Now from sharing, this one is in preview. I don't have anything set up there yet, but this is now where I can be able to share within internal or external people. So if I want to allow, let's say we are working with a consulting company and we want them to be able to define our reports, be able to design and create our Power BI templates, we can be able to share this schema with them so that they can be able to create their reports without having to share their actual data. So that's another key important piece here. We are not sharing, or we are not compromising our environment by sharing data. So it's almost like now the new world that we're going to, which is the synthetic data. So it's almost similar to that, but in this case I'm just providing them with the schema of my environment, and then they can be able to build whatever they want to build, rather than them having their actual control or actual access to our environment. So that's from the data share perspective. Then this one here is another important one. So the data estate insight. So this allows you to be able to see what kind of data that you have, from the sensitivity perspective, if the data is curated or not, if it's out of date or not. You have the ability to see that. So if your data here in this case is if you don't have data ownership, it's gonna detect that, so that now we need to go ahead and provide the contact information or who the owner is for that data, so that they can be able to, if I'm having issues with that data, I can be able to go and define who I request their access to. Similar case here with the assets. We kind of just gives us a different view of our data set here and what we can be able to see from the data perspective. So that's you want to make sure that at least you provide contact information for your end users. And then from the policies perspective, I'm not going to dwell too much on this one. This is where now you define your business rules. If you have any business rules that you want to define for your environment, this is where you're going to be providing that. You can create new policies, you can create new keywords, so that if it sees a specific data on a specific keyword on your data set, then go ahead and do this. So you're defining based on your business, so that's important as well. But where I wanted to come to is down here, from the management perspective. So this here is where now you define other cool features of this tool. Makes it very robust. So first of all, the overview, this just gives me the friendly name. If I want to change this, I can absolutely be able to change it. If I want my users to be able to see the insights from data estate, I can be able to do that. Whether it's on or off, I can be able to do that. Advanced resources. So all these are cool things that you can be able to say here. Different metrics. If we have metrics from Azure perspective that's configured, we can be able to see that. We can also be able to integrate with our data factory process, so that we can create the data lineage. So this guy here is gonna give me the ability to connect to a data factory pipeline, so that we can be able to create that data lineage process. So that's also important. And then that's a data share that we talked about, which is also part of that preview that will integrate with your Azure environment. But then this is where now it gets really powerful. So from workflow perspective, if I go back here on authoring perspective, you see that I can actually create some workflows that will, for instance, this one here is going to go ahead and discover the data that we have within the data catalog. So go ahead and continue. And I can define what I want it to do. So if, let's say, for instance, somebody creates a new grocery item, definition of a specific word, they delete it, they import it, or which have you, we want it to go through approval process, so that our users can actually know, or their approvers, people that have the ability to approve these keywords, can be able to see what we're putting out there. Because again, remember, in your environment, you want it to be more cloud sourcing, so that your users can be able to participate in labeling this data, because without these data labels, then the data becomes a little bit convoluted or harder to understand. So I'm gonna go ahead and create one here, and we're gonna create this one as grocery items. and then you can provide whatever description that you want to provide here. So I'm just gonna copy paste, and then I'm gonna go ahead and continue. And you see it actually has a template for the workflow that's already predefined. So when an item is created within Purview, then go ahead and initiate this workflow. So then here, the key things that you have to do is define who needs to approve this. So it can be a group or it can be a specific person. So in this case, let me just go ahead and search for my account here. And then the conditions is what's driving the workflow. So approval, when approver sends this, and if it's equals to approved, then go ahead and add that to grocery. If not, go ahead and send a rejected email. So it's a pretty simple workflow on what we have here. I'm gonna go ahead and save and close. And you can see now we have this one here, which is enabled, and I can go back in and be able to disable that workflow as well. If we don't want that workflow to keep running, we can be able to do that as well. Let me go back to authoring here, and you can see that's disabled. Another one here that's important is the governance. So when you create this environment, you also want to make sure that you set up the governance so that now when you're creating the environment, it can be based on access, who's requesting access, who's driving this environment. So we have that. So this is data access request workflow, and we're just gonna go ahead and just call it data request. I'm gonna go ahead and do continue. This is a little bit more robust workflow that we have here. So when an item is required, when data access is requested, go ahead and send the approval. So this one here, we still need to define who that person needs to be. And then it's gonna go through the process of identifying if it's approved or not. Then the governance, if we've set the governance to true, then we're gonna go ahead and allow that process to be access to be granted or access to be denied. So that's another piece here. So task title, I think we're good there. Then action, where we're sending the email to whichever person. There's one piece here that needs to be added. So the task, so you see here, it's actually telling you if there's any missing pieces, we'll be able to define that. So this is on create task. So let's go to create task, and this one here, we want to create a task. So let's go ahead and say we've defined this to me. And again, this can be defined to a group or it can be defined to an individual. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And you can see now we have that in process. So that's the authoring process. And then if there's any request for access, then this is where it would show up. And then our workflow runs, this is where that will also show up so that we can know if there's any workflows that are failing or not. So that's the environment, that's the Azure Microsoft Purview data governance process or application. I think it's a very, very powerful tool, and I would really encourage you to actually go in and start using this because it's gonna be very ideal for your environment. So thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you in the next video.